We talk about pregnancy, we talk about birth, but what about postpartum? Society just expects you to figure it out. It's supposed to come naturally, right? Heal fast, bounce back, and be grateful. If you're struggling mentally, physically, or in your marriage, you must be doing something wrong. And I'm calling that out today because I've done this 4 times and I'm in the thick of it right now, and I'm done pretending it's not hard. So let's actually talk about it. Welcome back to the Mom Department. I'm your host, Deborah, and today we're going somewhere most people really avoid the real postpartum experience. Not the Instagram version, the one that we see, cherish every moment, and the perfect everything aesthetic. We're going to actually be talking the actual truth. I've been through postpartum 4 times now, and I'm currently walking through it right now with my 5-month-old. So this is really, really fresh on my mind. And each time it's truly taught me something different. Each time has broken me in new ways and it's rebuilt me in others. Before I go any further, I really do want to make this clear that this episode isn't medical advice. I'm not a doctor. This is just me sharing what I've experienced and what I wish I knew, what I feel might help you feel less alone in this season right now. Because here's the thing, we prepare for 9 months. We read the books, we take all the classes, we spend so much time washing their tiny little clothes, and we set up their nursery, but no one prepares us for what happens to us after the baby arrives. So today I'm going to be covering it all, the physical stuff, the mental, the emotional stuff, and what it does to your relationships. What actually has helped me get through it, and what I wish someone had told me from the beginning. So let's get into it. So let's start with the body stuff. Because nobody adequately prepares you for what your body goes through after birth. And the first thing they really don't prepare you for is the first time you use the bathroom after giving birth. The fear is real. It's real. You're sitting there on the toilet, traumatized after what you've just been through, and you're holding that peri bottle like your life depends on it because it kind of does at that point. And nobody told me that you'll need a survival kit just to pee. I'll be super transparent about it. It really can sting. But in my own experience, especially because I've never torn when giving birth, the first pee is honestly the most nerve-wracking part because you're not sure what's going to happen, especially after you've pushed a watermelon out of your vag. After the first pee, though, I think you'll be okay. You'll be prepared for what's going to happen. So if you have a peri bottle, it'll be all right. But no one prepares you for that. And another thing that nobody prepares you for, that big scary part, is the first poop. I told you guys I'm gonna be pretty transparent about it. You have to mentally reconnect your brain with that sensation of pushing poop out. Then you're scared about causing damage because you literally have to like push again. And literally going through that is like mental warfare. My biggest advice when walking through this whole part is to hydrate, and eat well. After you give birth, you're gonna want to have that big first meal where the food can actually go into your stomach and not into your like ribs and go back up your mouth with acid reflux and heartburn. You're going to want to have that big meal, but what you're really going to want to do is just hydrate and eat well. Try and poop within 24 hours. You're going to want to eat things with fiber. You're going to want to eat warm soups so then you can pass it easily. If you're eating things that are super heavy in carbs, trust me, you're going to feel it. And after you get through your first poop, your body figures it out. It's like muscle memory, but honestly, the first time it can really be terrible. And every postpartum period, I'm always like wincing thinking about that, knowing that I'm going to have to go through it. But you do eventually get through it. The next thing is the bleeding. I thought it would be like a heavy period for the first few days, but like I'm going back to my first postpartum period because like obviously I've been through it 4 times now. I know what to expect. But no, that stuff lasts for weeks, weeks. And sometimes it'll be like 6 weeks and more. And the first time around, I didn't really focus on learning about this, and I really should have, but I was young and naive, and I bounced back quickly after my first time. And that may not be the experience for everybody, but I'm just talking about what happened with me. I had just walked through my first home birth. It was quick. Once I had her, I literally felt like I went back to normal. But what I didn't realize was that I didn't really go back to normal. Although I felt like I physically was, I didn't realize all the internal work that my body was actually going to have to be doing to get back to normal. It really wasn't until I think 3 kids later that I really learned and practiced that 5-5-5 rule of postpartum. I believe it's 5 days in bed, 5 days around your bed, and 5 days kind of around the house is kind of the rule of thumb to just kind of let your body heal and kind of let your body do what it needs to do. Because if you go back to the rigorous running around, you can really cause some damage and cause you to have more postpartum bleeding than you really have to. And when I practice this 5-5-5 rule, I realized how quick my bleeding kind of wrapped up. I think by like week 2, my bleeding had gone away. When my first time around, because I didn't practice that, I mean, the next day after I'd given birth, I was at Target shopping. Like, I think back on that and I'm like, dude, you were insane. But I remember like my postpartum bleeding had kind of healed a little bit by like week 2, and then after that, because I was like lifting the stroller, I was going around shopping. And then I noticed I started bleeding again. I was talking to my midwife and she was like, yeah, when your uterus is healing, especially when your placenta comes off, she's like, it's like a wound. And when you have a wound and you pull that scab back, you're going to start bleeding again. And you need to rest, you need to relax, and you don't need to be doing everything. And that really, really clicked for me. So 5-5-5 rule will be your best friend if you're able to do it. Another thing that people talk about, the phrase bounce back. Honestly, I hate it. I know I said that, but I really do hate it. Your body really does not bounce back like an elastic. It's not a rubber band. You literally just grew a whole human and you birth this little human. And now it looks different, it feels different, and it moves different. And have some loose skin. You may have a different body type now. Your hair might start falling out postpartum. No one talks about that. These things happen and these things are normal, but we act like it's something to fix instead of literally like something to expect. And we really need to start talking about these things. Like, stop talking about, oh, bounce back, your body just snaps back. It really doesn't. It takes time, and we need to honor our bodies and allow it time to do these things rather than rushing the process, because sometimes rushing can lead to disappointment. And sometimes the rushing can lead to more damage internally that you really don't realize. Another thing that we don't really talk about, and it's kind of been talked about a little bit more, but we do really need to highlight it. It's breastfeeding. If you do choose to breastfeed, it can be brutal, but it also can be really, really magical. You get those cracked and sore nipples in the beginning, the massive engorgement that you'll get, or the leaking through your shirt all the time, or even like if you go through that latching issues. And latching can literally, if you have issues with that, it can break you. It can cause you to cry because you're told that this comes naturally, it'll be easy. And then when it doesn't come easily, that's a hard pill to swallow. I think that sometimes around breastfeeding, there can be a lot of pressure around it. I'm a breastfeeding mom. I've done it now 4 times. But there's a lot of pressure to it to make it work, or if it's not working, it's your fault. And, that kind of pressure really is crazy. And obviously, the best thing to always follow, fed is best, honestly. I'll say that till I'm blue in the face. However, you feed your baby, it's the right way. I've done breastfeeding to 4 months, then switching to formula. I've done breastfeeding to 9 months, then switched to formula. I've done exclusive breastfeeding through 15 months. I've done pumping. Now I'm just in the season where I'm exclusively breastfeeding. And that might change. I don't know. I just kind of follow what is going on in my season, what's going on in my life at this point. And removing that pressure or stigma that you have to breastfeed or you're a terrible mom, or if you give your kid formula, you're a terrible mom. Whatever is best for you mentally, physically, is what's best for your baby. I think there's just a lot of pressure around breastfeeding that we don't talk about. Another issue that kind of needs to be highlighted, and I never really knew about this really, it's the pelvic floor. And I've seen so many women who've talked about having incontinence after giving birth, and the stories are just so common that I've heard from other women. And we just kind of accept it. We joke about peeing on ourselves when we sneeze, or like when we're working out or jumping or not making it to the bathroom, and we've kind of just made it normal, and it really isn't normal. Like, yes, it's common that it happens, but it's because it's a pelvic floor issue, and it shouldn't be normalized as, yeah, you'll just have this issue for the rest of your life. It shouldn't. Pelvic floor therapy honestly should be a part of every postpartum care plan, and it's something to really think about when you're pregnant and kind of what you want to do postpartum so that you don't suffer from this or suffer in silence with this. Another quick thing I'm going to mention, and I'm not going to stay on it for a long time because I'm still going through it now, but I want to mention it because it's fresh on my mind now. It's the postpartum night sweats. My goodness, the postpartum sweats, or like the odor that we get postpartum, it is so embarrassing, and I'm gonna share an embarrassing story. With my first, I remember at night I would sweat, but I didn't realize that it was me who was sweating, and like my baby would be on me or from feeding. And the next morning, I would talk to my husband. I'd be like, "Oh my god, the baby stinks!" And I literally, for like a week straight, thought it was the baby who would stink in the morning. And it took me a while to realize, no, it's not the baby that stings, it's you. And I was the one that was sweating so bad at night. And I didn't realize it was me that was the one that was sweaty and smelled. I thought it was a baby. Yeah, I was sweating so bad at night, and I would wake up soaked and my bed would be wet, and I didn't know what was going on. And it wasn't until I researched it and I learned that my body was just getting rid of all of that pregnancy fluid. One thing I want to say is just make sure you always have good deodorant on hand because you're going to need it postpartum. The natural stuff, if you're using natural deodorant like I do, make sure you always have it with you because you will be reapplying it all the time. Now, this is something I prepare for mentally every single time I get pregnant, and that is the afterbirth pains. And I learned about it after I had my first. I don't really remember anyone really talking about it when I was pregnant. I didn't realize what was going on. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I just had this baby. Why am I still having contractions? And my midwife was like, oh, it's the afterbirth pains. It's your uterus contracting so it can go back to its normal size. I was like floored that I was still having contractions after I had the baby. And one thing I'm going to let you in on, because now I'm a mom who's gone through this 4 times. Unfortunately, every time you give birth, it gets worse. Now, I hate to be the one to break it to you because no one broke it to me until I had to figure it out. That every single time you have a baby, the postpartum contractions get worse. The after pains get worse. And it's just your uterus working really hard to clamp back to its normal size. Now, I have talked to some mothers who have said that they haven't noticed it or they didn't notice it. Mostly I heard these from mothers who have had epidurals. So if you've had epidurals, you may not notice it. Now, if you've gone naturally, or unmedicated, you will notice them. They get worse and worse each time you have a baby. And I've noticed that every single time I had a baby, I'd be rolling around on the bed because there's nothing you can really do. And it gets worse as it gets more intense. I mean, if you're nursing your baby, after pains get more and more intense. It's almost like, I would say, transition type contractions that you're getting, and it's shocking. And I didn't know about this. And there's some things that I've used that have worked. I've used some tinctures. I've used Tylenol, and I didn't realize that Tylenol did not work, and I did not know why it didn't work. And it wasn't until my fourth baby My midwife was like, "You shouldn't be using Tylenol. You should get yourself some Advil." And I got Advil, and what a difference that made in the postpartum after pains. So make sure have some tinctures. I'll put the one that I use in the show notes, and make sure you get to yourself some Advil because you'll save yourself a lot of pain. Lastly, I'm going to talk about sleep deprivation. I'm not talking about being tired. I'm going to talk about the kind of sleep deprivation that makes you feel like you're losing your mind. And this goes on for weeks and months. You'll just be having broken sleep. And it affects everything. It affects your mood, your patience, and literally your ability to function. For me, and this time around, and actually like my last postpartum experience, it affects my blood pressure, especially when I'm not getting adequate sleep. When I was young, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but when I was my first 2, I never experienced this. I was able to run on like 1 or 2 hours of sleep and just be perfectly fine. But now I don't know if it's just because it raises my cortisol levels and because I have a lot more on my plate. I have 4 kids, I'm doing homeschooling, but this time I've noticed that it literally raises my blood pressure, and I went and talked to my doctor about it, and she said that my blood pressure was elevated, but it wasn't at a point of concern, but she mentioned it's something to really, really keep an eye on. She was like, "I want you to try as best as you can to get a nap in whenever you can. Try and get some good rest. Try and drink a lot of water." And I realized when I made those changes, my blood pressure stabilized and went back to normal. One thing to kind of be aware of is that, you will be going through times of just, sleep deprivation. It's just the reality of what happens with motherhood because your baby needs to eat or your baby needs to be comforted. Your baby's going to get gas. So you're going to be up multiple times a night. And that's why having a community really does matter. This is why communication with your spouse is crucial. You cannot do this alone, and you're not supposed to do it alone, even though they're told, like, especially if you're breastfeeding, oh, what is he supposed to do? No, you're really not supposed to do it alone. Let your partner in on what's going on with you, where you are mentally, if you need to take a nap, and you just need to be able to communicate and just make sure you have some community or support if you're able to have that. So that's the physical truth. We went through it. But honestly, the physical stuff was, for me, a little easier to deal with than what was happening in my head. This section that we're going to talk about is the stuff that moms really kind of whisper about, but rarely say it out loud because we don't want to seem weak. We don't want people to think that we can't handle it. But I think staying silent is what is actually hurting us. Taking on the label of super mom can actually just be super, super damaging. So, first, I kind of want to talk about the difference between the baby blues and what is actually more serious. The baby blues really is common. It's the mood swings that you might have when you do have like those times where you're just crying a little bit, you're a little weepier than normal. The anxiety, the first few weeks of postpartum, your hormones are literally crashing, and it can be super intense, but you should know that it really should be temporary. Now, postpartum depression and anxiety, that's different. They last a lot longer and it can feel a lot heavier. And they can interfere with your ability to function or even sometimes bond with your baby. And they definitely require, I would say, support, and whether that be therapy, whether that be medication, or even both. And honestly, there really isn't shame in getting help. I know that some people or even some cultures can kind of shame people around that, and it really shouldn't be any shame around it. I think honestly, the real shame is that we don't talk about this, and there's not enough room for mom to recognize it in themselves. And I think that is the biggest shame in the whole postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. Another thing that I really want to talk about, and can I can I really be honest with you about, intrusive thoughts. They are like kind of low key terrifying. And I know that almost every mom that I've talked to have experienced it. and they experience it, but they're almost too embarrassed or scared to admit it publicly because it is kind of weird. I mentioned it to my husband before, and he looked at me like I was nuts. He literally looked at me like I was nuts. 'Cause the thoughts are crazy. It's those sudden, weird, scary thoughts that like flash through your brain when you're doing something. Like it happens to me sometimes when I'm carrying my baby down the stairs. It's like, what if I drop this baby down the stairs? Or what if I roll over on the baby? And it's like things that like don't make sense, but they still go through your mind. And honestly, it doesn't mean that you're a bad mom when you have these thoughts. They don't mean that you're dangerous to your kid. Honestly, I learned that they're a symptom of an overwhelmed or anxious brain, honestly. And it's it's normal. It really is normal. But if they're, like, persistent and they're getting worse or more intense, what I would say is definitely talk to somebody because, the intrusive thoughts will just be random thoughts that go through your brain, and that's totally normal, and you're not deranged. But if they're getting more intense and they're increasing, definitely I would say go talk to somebody. Another thing that hit me hard that I wanna talk about is the identity crisis because you think about that you wanted this baby. I prayed for this child. So why am I feeling completely lost in myself? Like, I feel like I'll look at myself and I don't recognize my body, my schedule, my thoughts, and everything that I used to feel like, or like my former self just feels like it disappeared overnight. All I literally talk about, or I feel like I can talk to another person about, is just being a mom and my kids. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but like sometimes I feel like I've lost all my hobbies. I've lost all my interests. The things that I used to love doing, all because I'm so consumed into motherhood. And I think nobody warns you about the grief or the grieving that you'll feel while you're trying to figure it out of who you're becoming. And you're definitely not the same person that you were before you had kids. I know that's the truth. And you really won't ever be that same person, and it's okay. And yes, it is heartbreaking at the same time. But the person that you're becoming, it's like the 2.0 version of yourself. But it's going to take time for you to reconnect with the core person that you are and the person that you're becoming. Another thing that I feel like is a huge one is resentment. And resentment, it's really, really, really uncomfortable to admit, to be quite honest. You'll have resentment towards your partner because they get to sleep and they get to leave the house by themselves while you have a baby attached to you, and they get to have their body to themselves. And sometimes you might feel resentment towards your baby for just needing you constantly. And you're that only person that can really comfort them. You're the only person that can feed them, and you just love that little being so, so darn much. But then you also feel like they're sucking the life force out of you. Even the resentment that you'll feel sometimes just towards your old life, the freedom that you had, the spontaneity that you had, the silence. Honestly, the silence. Now I have multiple kids, and I literally think about the silence. And it's so crazy because now my life is not silent. I have 4 kids, 6 and under, and it's never silent anymore. And, it doesn't make you a bad mom for missing those things. It literally just makes you human. And way more common than anyone admits that having these feelings are normal, because we don't want to admit these things because it makes you look bad. Because someone might just say you're complaining. And you're not complaining, you're just kind of expressing what is going on, the turmoil that's going on with you, the battle that's going within you. And you love this new life. Love being a mom, but also you miss certain aspects of your old life. And that's okay to admit that. Another thing that people don't want to admit is the loneliness of postpartum. The loneliness of postpartum is unlike anything else. And honestly, here's the cruel irony: you're never actually alone. The baby is always there and it's always needing you, but you've never just felt more isolated, especially if you have like older kids. Like your spouse will like take them out. Like I know my husband will like take them out for like, I don't know, car ride or go out to eat or go out to a play place or go do something just to give me a break. And then sometimes I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna have a break." But then you realize, "Oh, nope, there's no real break because you still have the baby," especially if your baby or newborn can't be away from you for that long. You still have that baby with you. And then if you have older kids and they go to bed and normally it's your time off for your spouse, but it's not time off for you because you still have that baby you need to feed, whether it's every couple of hours or if they need you. Some babies just need you a lot more. And it literally is just a 24/7 job with no punch out or clock out time. And the isolation of that can literally eat at you if you don't name it or if you don't communicate that with your partner. And the pressure to be grateful. There's that guilt layer on top of that. Like, you should be happy. You wanted this, and other people would just be so happy to be doing what you're doing right now. And I acknowledge that. And, we should acknowledge that. But it's the truth. You can be struggling. And the guilt of that, it just kind of makes everything worse sometimes. And it can keep you from reaching out to people or admitting the truth or for getting help. You can be grateful and be struggling at the same time. Both of those things can be true. And I think that sometimes some people or society can just be like, just be quiet. You cannot be struggling because some people would die to be in your place right now. Some people would want to be, a mother right now. But honestly, both things can be true. And one more thing that doesn't get talked about enough, that is postpartum rage. And that's not just frustration that you may feel. I'm talking about real raw rage. And I know some of you have experienced it. It's the kind that literally just comes out of nowhere and it scares you. And that means like snapping at your partner, snapping at your kid for something that normally wouldn't piss you off. And it's that anger that feels disproportionate to the situation that's actually currently happening. And it's real and it's underreported. And often it's literally just linked to sleep deprivation or like that hormonal shift. And it's that feeling sometimes of just feeling unsupported that you just have so much piled on top of you and it just explodes and it just comes out inappropriately. And it's often not your partner's fault or not your kid's fault. And it just happens. And I want you to know, sis, that you are not a monster. It's common, but please, please, please don't ignore it. Get help if you need it. Talk to somebody if you need to, but don't ignore it. So that is the mental and emotional reality that we go through. But postpartum doesn't just change you, it changes everything around you as well. So let's talk about postpartum and what it does to your relationships. Because literally nobody goes untouched during postpartum period. Your relationship with your spouse will change overnight. You go from being partners to being literally co-managers of a tiny little demanding human being. And somewhere in the middle, I feel like in between the diaper changes and the feeding schedules, you literally can start to feel like roommates instead of lovers and partners and that person that was just your best friend. And I remember on my wedding night, someone told me and my husband that if you're not intimate and being proactive in your relationship with your spouse, then you're essentially just roommates. And I literally remembered when this man said this to me, and I was like, ew, you're weird. And it wasn't until now that I've had kids that I realized that this person wasn't being weird. They were being right. You have to be intentional in your relationship because the resentment over who does what honestly starts to creep in. Who gets to have more sleep? That resentment starts to creep in. Who last changed the diaper? Who gets to leave the house? And it's not pretty. And if you don't talk about it, it literally just festers. So make sure you are constantly communicating about where you are emotionally, where you are physically, where you need support, because sometimes men really don't know unless you tell them. Honestly, women, we need to be honest with ourselves because we as women can sometimes feel like they should know what needs to be done. We literally will think this like, why don't you know that the dishwasher needs to be run? Why don't you know this has to be picked up? And we will think it in our minds because we are constantly running lists and mental notes and everything in our minds. And men, they aren't doing that all the time. They aren't wired the way that we are. So we need to give some grace on their part, but we also need to be able to communicate effectively and just be like, hey, go run that dishwasher. Hey, go run that load of laundry. Hey, take the baby because I need a break right now. We need to be able to communicate that with our partners because sometimes it's not fair for us to assume that they know what needs to be done. And another thing we need to talk about is intimacy after baby. And intimacy, let's be real, there's a physical readiness and then there's the emotional readiness that we're going to have to talk about. And they're not the same, and they're not going to be running on the same timeline. And you might need to be cleared by your doctor at 6 weeks, but that doesn't mean that you might be cleared at 6 weeks, but that doesn't mean that you're ready, honestly. And the pressure can be intense because you can see that your partner is itching to get back in there, and you may not be ready. And then there's also that like feeling of being touched out. And when you've had that baby on you all day long, the last thing you're really going to want is another person to be needing something from your body. And that's valid. And I've had times during postpartum where I've been intimate super quick, like 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. I know. And then there's others where it's been 6 weeks or maybe longer. And I think the most important part is communicating this with your spouse. And, intimacy doesn't always need to be like sex. Intimacy can just be like, we need to like have some time to cuddle and be alone and just talk about everything. And you just really want to continue investing in your relationship because that's going to be the most important thing right now. You guys, as a team, need to be like glue and you guys need to be on that same page because, again, you don't want that resentment. You don't want to become roommates. And being intimate as much as possible, as much as you when you're ready, is going to be important. You're going to want to carve out that time for a quick date, even if it's at home. Because for us, we don't really have like a built-in community around us right now. A lot of my family's out of state and we don't have babysitters. So for me and my husband, a lot of the times it's just us doing date nights at home. Like if we're able to get the baby to sleep or even the baby's like sleeping right next to us, we'll get some food, we'll order in and we'll watch a movie and that's our date. And that's going to look different throughout the years. That's going to look different throughout the weeks and months, but just adjust and be able to communicate that with your partner as much as possible. Another thing, your friendships are going to shift. Some friends are just going to disappear, and that's the reality. Or if you're the first one to have a baby, and some people may not understand. You may not have the energy to maintain friendships with people who don't have kids yet because you're living a completely different life than they are. And I remember when I was the first one in my group to have babies, I was always trying to keep up with my childless friends. I was still going out. Me and my husband were still bringing the baby with us to like a beer garden and, doing the millions of things with my single friends or my friends who didn't have kids yet and just pretending that everything was normal. And, it was really exhausting. Very, very exhausting. And eventually I just realized I needed to have friendships with other moms. And, some friendships with friends who didn't have kids, it just didn't survive. And they didn't survive in that season. You can always revive friendships, and that's not a failure. It's just kind of life. It's where you are in that season of life, and that's okay. And I'll be honest, I went on those mom friend apps and I tried to find friends who understood. And that was like one of the best things I ever did in that season was find like-minded friends who were in the same season of life that I was in and who were in my area. And we did mommy meetups and we went to the zoo and At first it felt weird, but it was almost like dating, and it was like making friends with people who understood what you were going through at that point. And I think that if we don't do that, loneliness will really start to set in. I think at some point you should be willing to try to make new friends and mommy friends who are in that season of life with you, or even older moms who've been through that season and can understand and can help validate things that you're going through. Another thing that changes is the family dynamic. There's going to be boundary struggles with your parents or even with your in laws, the unsolicited advice and the boundaries you need to make around advice, or the comments about how you're feeding your baby, how you're holding your baby, or how you're raising your baby, or how you're not maintaining things the way that they did when they were raising their kids, and just feeling judged by in your most vulnerable season. Those are the times you're going to be needing to set boundaries postpartum, because it is hard. You're exhausted, often dependent on help, but also it's necessary to be putting those boundaries in place, and you're allowed to protect your peace from people who you love and who also love you. Because at the end of the day, your mental sanity is going to be the most important thing. So if you need to set boundaries, say or tell someone, hey, that's not helpful right now, or I can't listen to this right now, or this is what we're doing at this point with our family, and you're going to need to be okay with that. Back off. And it's okay to set those boundaries, and it's okay to set those boundaries early, so then everyone knows what to expect in your circle, and those people will still love you at the end of the day. Okay. So I know that we've covered a lot of hard truths. Now let's talk about what actually helped me get through it. I really don't want to leave you in the heaviness. So here's what actually made a difference for me, and what I'd tell any mom who's walking in this season right now. The first thing I would say is prepare before the baby comes. And I don't mean prepare the nursery. Although that's important, it really isn't all that important. What I mean is prepare meals for yourself, or prepare a meal train. I know that my church, they do meal trains for new mothers. But my mother, every time I have a baby, I'm so grateful for this, but my mom will come and stay with my family for a month, and she'll help with anything that comes with that. She'll help with laundry, she'll help with meals, she'll help with my other kids. And that is just such a blessing for me, because it helps me just focus on me and the baby. But one thing that I will say, that having help scheduled for those first few weeks will really be crucial for you. And I think that you should just really be realistic about expectations, and you should be realistic about those things with yourself and with your partner. So you should honestly talk about who's going to be doing what before you're too exhausted to even have those conversations. And I know that there are some people who don't have a built-in community for things, and that's the honest truth. There's some people who just don't have a built-in community, and for that, I would say preparation is gonna be your best friend. So you're definitely gonna wanna do some meal prep before the baby comes. Like, prepare some frozen meals. If you're making dinner that night when you're pregnant, double that recipe and put it in the freezer, and do that for a month or 2 before the baby comes. So then when it's time, your partner can just heat up something quickly, and that's nutritious for you. Also, if you're not a huge cook, I would say budget some money. Put some money away for takeout for those nights where, if your frozen meals dry up, or you're tired of it, you don't want to do it, or if your meal train is done, have some money away so that you can have, the little luxury of doing takeout, or even having the luxury of having someone come in to clean your home if needed. Have some money put aside for that. Be prepared, because that's going to be your biggest help. Another big help is going to be accepting help, and accepting help without guilt. Let people bring you food. Let someone come in and hold the baby so you can shower. Let your mother in law or your husband do the laundry, even if they fold it wrong. This is not the time for pride. And this is coming from someone who chronically suffers from pride. I like things done a particular way, but I also have learned that I need to pick my battles. You need support, and accepting it doesn't make you weak. Also, another thing is lowering your bar. Survival mode is okay. The dishes can wait, honestly. You don't need to bounce back and have it all together. But, what I'm going to say, but, this is important. You don't want to stay in that survival mode because I know that we can get in that survival mode and be like, let's just let the hot mess roll on. But you don't want to because the longer you let the survival mode like just become your normal, the longer you don't feel like yourself. So get dressed in the morning, brush your teeth, go take a shower, get out of the house if you can, even if it's just for a walk around the neighborhood. Those small things really, really help you feel kind of human again. And you deserve to feel like yourself, even if it's in piecemeal. Find your people, even if it's just one person, one friend, one group chat. Find one community where you can be honest and unfiltered. For me, it's my sisters. We FaceTime daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and we're in different stages of motherhood and we just share everything. And I'm able to share with them, and they're my sounding board, they're my sanity check, my proof that I am not alone. So find your version of that, and it's literally going to be everything from making you feel like you're crazy. So reach out to me if you need somebody. If you can't find somebody, reach out to me. My DMs are open and my comment section are open. Reach out if you need someone to talk to because it's not fun going through it alone, okay? Another thing I'm going to say is move your body. And I'm not talking about that just to get your bounce back or for weight loss. I need you to hear that. It's not for weight loss. Moving your body is so beneficial for your mental health. A walk around the block counts. Put that baby on you or put it in the stroller and take a walk around the block. The fresh air will do wonders for you. The sun will do wonders for you. And it's not about burning calories, although that is really good for you. It's just about reminding your body that it is yours. Another thing that you're going to want to do is talk to someone, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, or a postpartum support group. Normalize getting help early, not just when you're in the crisis or when you're freaking out over everything. You're going to want to do it early when you feel that buildup happening. You don't need to earn the right to get support by suffering through it first. You really want to do it early. Communicate with your partner, even when you're exhausted, especially when you're exhausted. Communicate because resentment builds and it builds so fast in silence. So say the hard thing that you have to say. Ask for what you need. Assume they want to help you, but they may not know how. So you again, they may not know. So you have to communicate. And finally, give yourself a timeline for grace. I tell myself I will not make any major decisions or judge my progress for 3 months. No evaluating my body, no deciding if I'm a good mom, no big life changes, just surviving and giving myself permission to not have it figured out. Because it takes time to come into a new routine and it takes time to get into the swing of things. It takes time to find your new normal. So, before I close, I want to share a few things I wish someone had told me directly, like a friend who had been through it already before. So I'm going to say it to you as someone who's done it 4 times already. If I could go back and talk to myself in those early postpartum days, here's what I would say. I wish someone had told me that not feeling an instant bond with my baby doesn't mean that I'm broken, that sometimes love takes time to grow and it grows slowly, and that's okay. I wish someone had told me that it's okay to mourn your old life while loving, I mean, absolutely loving your new one, and that grief and gratitude can exist in the same breath. I wish someone had also told me that struggling doesn't mean that you're failing. It literally means that you are human. And asking for help is the bravest thing that you can do. I wish someone had told me that the rage, the resentment, and the loneliness, they don't make you a bad mom. It literally makes you a real one. And I wish someone had told me that it gets better. Not perfect, not perfect, but it does get better. The fog eventually does lift, that light at the tunnel gets brighter, and you start to feel like yourself again. Maybe a different version, but it's still you. So if you need to hear this today, let me be that person for you. You are not broken. You are not failing. Honestly, you are becoming. If you're in the thick of postpartum right now, like I am, I see you. You are doing harder work than anyone gives you credit for. And the fact that you're here listening, trying to find your people, that tells me everything about the kind of mom that you are. If you're struggling, please reach out to someone. You don't have to wait until it's an emergency to ask for help. And I want to hear from you. Comment or DM me on Instagram, and I'll put my handle on the screen and in the show notes. And tell me, what do you wish someone had told you about the postpartum period? I want to know your story. This community isn't just me talking, it's us building something together. So I want to leave you with this. Postpartum isn't just recovery, it's transformation. And transformation is so messy, so painful, and so beautiful all at once. You are not doing it wrong. You're just doing it, and that's enough. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.